Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to today's Reddit Quickie from the subreddit HFY, called Billy Bob Space Trucker, Chapter 16, written by Regal. The link to the original will be down below, and as always, I hope that you enjoy. Cast matriarch Elizabeth approached the entrance of a private hunting reef. Her servants had released a few Viverine slugs and some Herculid otters in a large underwater chamber for her to hunt. Technically, this was a semi-intelligent creature on the path to full intelligence. But the Crustacean matriarchs had blocked all attempts to change their status from unprotected wildlife to the much more strictly regulated, potentially intelligent species list. They were simply too tasty, not to mention it was more fun to hunt something a bit smarter than usual. For her specifically, she enjoyed the fear in their eyes just before she ended them. You only got that with something that had a glimmer of personality behind those eyes. Her favorite was of course the ancient nemesis of the Libertonians. She had been a juvenile when she'd last tasted them in the Galactic War. They had resisted the idea of a galactic government that regulated and suppressed species to operate at around the same level of capability, in order to make things fair. The Libertonians had argued for more freedom, less regulations, and why shouldn't they? They were stronger, faster, smarter, and they could fly. She wasn't ashamed to admit her species was jealous of their ability to fly. Who, amongst the galactic community, wasn't jealous of those who could stretch their wings and take off into the sky? The Crustaceans could breathe in water and air, and swim in the ocean depths with ease, but to fly? It hadn't been difficult for them to convince the other races to fall in line to agree with regulation. After all, only the exceptional struggled. And the thing about being exceptional, they were the exception, the few species that could contain their jealousy of the species that were superior to them. They fought valiantly, but in the end they were defeated by sheer numbers. The Crustaceans' greatest victory was in keeping their enemies alive, however, and reducing them to a single colony off of their home planet, and the bare minimum fleet, to force them to watch the galaxy continue as they were left powerless. They refused to be entirely beaten, of course, which was why from time to time the matriarch got to dine upon a spy or a diplomat that went missing. Being the galaxy's secret police had its advantages in acquiring the rarest of foods, especially if eating such food was against a dozen different regulations and laws. Somehow that made the meal tastier. Her mandibles quivered in anticipation of her feast tonight, but before she could open up the hatch and begin her hunt, she heard her vid screen chime at her. Normally she'd ignore it, but this was a screech of her emergency line. The matriarch hissed in annoyance and moved over to the vid screen, turning it on with one of her foreclaws. "What?" she hissed out, and saw cast leader Cleroy cower for a moment. "I'm sorry, matriarch, but there had been more developments with the Libertonian diplomat." All 12 of her eyes narrowed as she examined the screen and the cast leader looking at her. The one with the copy of the suppression device, you mean? The one who could possibly end the galaxy as we know it? The one who was traveling alone to try and avoid detection, and should have been captured cycles ago? The one trying to make it to the capital for the Grand Council? That diplomat? Is this the diplomat you speak of, Cleroy? As if there was any other diplomat that I would have ordered you to track. Is this that diplomat that you are referring to? The same diplomat who has found a Deathworld mercenary that killed a hunter-killer squad and injured cast leader Bleeblob? There was a pause as Cleroy waited, unsure if the matriarch was going to continue. Yes? Ah, well, now that I know which diplomat you're referring to, what is it? The Deathworlder is a grave threat. We can't even find him. They haven't been stopped at refueling stations, but the ship only has a single pilot. We're unsure how they're avoiding detection, but I assure you that we're doing our best to track them down. Clearly, your best isn't good enough. Have all the cast leaders in the sector patched into this mission. Criminals, smugglers, pirates, they all have the back seat to this diplomat. Yes, matriarch, but, about the Deathworlders, I think it's a mistake to start moving against the extra soldier colonies. This American subspecies seems to be truly independent of the large government, which has been cooperative so far. Leroy, I wasn't aware that you doubled in size, grown 6 new limbs, 8 eyes, and changed your reproductive organs. When did that happen? Cast leader was clearly confused. I haven't, matriarch? Oh, so you're not the matriarch then? No, matriarch? Then why are you questioning my decision? The council has decided the easiest way to end the situation is to start conquering colonies and threatening to kill these filthy humans until the mercenary surrenders the diplomat. If you don't want that to happen, then find her on your own. But matriarch, the new footage I found that if you read the report, it's clearly flake, Leroy. Such a species can't exist. Nothing strong is that small, and even if they were good fighters, we can use our police action to justify a full galactic war against them. We defeated the Libertonians, we can stop these humans. And if you can't find the mercenary, it's clearly because he's terrified, likely cowering in some hole like Wizard Vermin, soiling himself in fear at his hunter-killers closing on him. There will be no mercenary for this Billy Bob space trucker. Why would you sign up for this contest? Because I'm a shoo-in. Doesn't translate. Because I can't lose. They have based it on the human dancing from the mid-1900s. As far as I can tell, I can listen to all the music all the time, and I'm a good dancer. I've crushed those space fleckos and the refueling station, remember? Oh, I think your translator isn't properly calibrated. Yeah. They were supposed to be good dancers, right? And they got beat so bad that they tried to attack me. And then I knocked them flat. Buddy Bob, this competition is supposed to be for groups. You'll have to do all the dancing solo. And can't tell me that... Oh, right, your species has incredible endurance. Okay. Well, you're supposed to have costumes. Did you think about that? Where are you going? Emily stopped looking around as she remembered that they were in the middle of a black market station. You need me to buy you some things, don't you? Please. It's a bit of a rush, but it's simple stuff. I have a few pieces I keep in my truck for Halloween. I just need to get a few items to complete some others. Don't you have money? Most of it went to fuel. I was supposed to get paid real credits by those space hippies. You should know that space hippies use real credits as little as possible. Hey, I'm new to the galaxy. I know now. Come on, Emily. Please. No, please, come on. Billy Bob. No, please, pretty please. Please with the cherry on top. Come on. I'll let you take whatever we win. Unless it's a trophy. I get that. You won't let this go, will you? Not a chance. Fine, but you have to promise to do what I want at the next stop. Yes! Billy Bob grinned. Deal, I swear. Whatever you want. Emily sighed out and handed him her trade cube before he turned and rushed off to whatever store that he'd found costumes in. She returned to the restaurant and sighed out. The waiter had left their drinks on the table as she sat heavily, taking a sip of the hot beverage she ordered. She couldn't believe that the energy that Billy Bob had. He was downright manic when he discovered something that excited him. If this was how adult humans behaved, what were their children like? She shuddered at the thought. It was a few minutes before he returned with a big smile on his face as he handed the cube back to her and sat down. She shook her head and sipped at his own drink. Then he waved the waiter down and asked for a bunch of ice. And once he got it, he dropped in a few chunks of the ice into the tea to cool it further. Then he drank it all in one go as Emily stared. How do you drink so much caffeine at once? Don't you get sick? What? No. This is just like 1 cup of tea. You don't know anything about caffeine until you're drinking a Super Space Extreme Triple Caf Express Mocho with extra cream. Is? She frowned and shook her head. I don't want to know what that is. It's a ton of caffeine, sugar, chocolate, and cream. And then usually with some whiskey, 'cause that really warms you up. Humans' diets are so strange, you can process large amounts of caffeine. I mean, if I'm drinking the regular stuff, I can't drink enough to kill me. Unless I'm like holding it in my bladder and it bursts, like that's a dumb way to kill myself. She blinked a bit, her mask blank, as she tried to figure out how to proceed. And you also intake capsaicin? Yeah, depending on what kind of food you're eating. Latin stuff, some Asian things. But I stay away from anything made by Indians. As far as I can tell, they're annoyed at how much beef we eat. So they don't actually make food. Then what do they make? They make puree terrorism that leads to gut-wrenching butt explosions that makes you feel like you're crapping fire. Emily grimaced. The kind of screaming craps that turns atheists into religious fanatics begging any god that'll listen for mercy. Ugh, Billy Bob. What? I'm not the one who tries to pass off that dog diarrhea as food. Billy Bob, stop, she gasped out. Two of her hands covering her face as the other two gestured as she tried to drive the images from her head. She was fairly sure that her translator wasn't even getting the right words, but what it sounded like was making her sick. There is no way that that's accurate. You've never had Indian food, I'm telling you. Those vegetarians can hold a grudge for eating their sacred animal. Stop, enough, you'll make me sick. He shrugged, and then he waved over the waiter to order some spiced tea. Emily sighed as she shook her head and looked over at her. Tell you what, why don't I treat you to some real American cooking? Real old classic stuff. The things that I had when I was a kid and my mum wanted to make me feel warm and comfy. Emily paused at that and slowly nodded. That sounds interesting. Actually, good. Can you handle dairy? Well, I won't know until I eat it, will I? Good point. All right, I'll have to go talk to the chef, see if he's got the stuff in stock. He paused and looked at Emily, and she looked back. He stood there, staring at her without speaking. She was about to ask, then he sighed and pulled the cube back out, setting it into his hand. Thanks. Emily sat in her seat, wondering just what she was getting herself into. It took about 10 minutes before he returned with 2 plates and 2 bowls. She tried to figure out what she was looking at. Squares of bread and a soup of some sort, it looked like. It couldn't be full of blood, could it? Grilled cheese with bacon and Texas toast and tomato soup with sour cream. Oh, so it's not blood? What? No? Jesus! It's some stuff mushed up plants and herbs and stuff. Apparently human food is a huge seller in the underground omnivore and carnivore markets. The space gobos are spreading it through the stations already. Space gobos? You humans shorten everything, don't you? Yep. He sat down, pulling his square apart as she saw the strings of yellow, which was some sort of reddish, crispy something inside of it. He dunked part of it into the soup, and then he bit off a portion of it, grinning as he clearly enjoyed it. Emily slowly dipped the corner of her own square into the soup, removing her mask and glancing around for a moment, and then snapping the corner. She quickly opened her mouth, gasping and waving a hand in front of it while laughing. Sorry, it's kinda hot. She nodded and took a sip of her water before she settled down and thought it over. That's pretty good. He smiled and dunked another bit of his. Well, now it was a triangle. Either way, he dunked it in and held it in the air. She looked at him and he wiggled it in the air for a moment before slowly she dunked part of hers by holding it up. He bumped his square against his triangle. Cheers! And they ate the rest, and then, bit by bit, as hers cooled off a bit more. There were a couple moments where she tried to pull away, and the piece of yellow stuff kept following her, which had Billy Bob laughing as she tried twisting and turning to get it to stop following her head. He didn't let her finish her square, though, and instead had her drink up on the soup until the last bits were sticking in the bowl, and then he showed her how to scrape the last of the soup with the last of the square. So that's an American meal. One of them. Classic stuff from when I was a kid. Hell, the first thing I learned to make myself was grilled cheese, 'cause microwaving hot dogs doesn't count. He laughed for a moment, and Emily felt rather full and satisfied. Well, if that's your style of cooking, then I wouldn't mind it, but not all the time. Your meals are rather large for my kind. I'll make you a smaller portion next time. Don't when you're getting sick. She smiled and at that and shook her head. You're full of surprises. Your species is so small and yet you're so strong. Your endurance is off the charts and your diet. You can fight, fly and cook reasonably well. She shook her head. Not to mention that you're one of the battle dance species. Well, we aren't really. I just learned how to dance really well, 'cause I like it. We have a few cultures that dance before a battle, but they mostly lost to guys who just shoot them instead of letting them finish. Aside from sports, I mean. Not legal to shoot the home team as they dance around. She wasn't quite sure that he was serious or not. What kind of war do you engage in? Total. What? Total war, mostly. Every so often it's armies against armies out in the fields and stuff. Worked that way for a while. But plenty of times, and especially after America became an independent nation, they fought for keeps, destroying everything that they couldn't keep, ravishing supply lines, starving whole countries. Frick, the Russians play for keeps. They burn their own stuff just despite the guys invading them, and people still keep trying to invade. They burn their own land, and towns, and supplies, whatever they couldn't take or defend. If they could time it properly, they'd burn it to the enemy advancing into fire. This is from a country that snows for most of the year. Emily frowned at that. Truly. Well, it's frickin' cold, -40 in the winter, I think. She balked at that. What? But your species is okay in standard temperatures. Yeah? I mean, California, where I'm from, is often in the low 100s in summer. She gasped again. What? Your species survives just fine in both -40 and in the low 100s. In Fahrenheit, I'm not sure if your translator is loaded with it. Or space metric. -40 is actually the same in both. I think that the high end would be the space metric. He squinted and he tried to remember. 50, maybe? Mid-40s? Oh, yes, I think that's more reasonable then. Why do you have two different units for temperature? 'Cause ours is better. What? Then whose? Look, we shouldn't discuss units of measure used on Earth. This all subject, 'cause the whole world wants America to change, and we tell them to shove it. Shove what? I'll try and explain that later. She shook her head slowly, clearly confused. Then he perked up. My implant's just pinged. My costume's ready. Come on, Emily, you gotta come and watch me dance. She sighed out as he jumped up and rushed out, and she had to follow after him quickly, putting her mask back on. He was halfway down the street when she saw a squad of fillers enter the cultural dance center, however. She gasped softly, as she feared that they might be looking to settle the score with the space trucker. Billy Bob! She cried out, and cursed. It seemed like the dance competition was going to be a lot more competitive than she thought. And so ends another chapter in the adventures of Billy Bob Space Trucker. I hope that you enjoyed. If you'd like to support the channel or the author, all the stuff is down below. And as always, I hope that you guys have a good one, and I'll see you in the next story. Cheers.